Welcome back to Grace Cathedral.
Thank you. Thank you.
For those who are watching and don't know you, can you give us a quick sketch of your work?
Sure. So I'm now really an installation artist, which means I create large-scale sculptures for public spaces. And I've been doing a little bit of work. Well, my first really large one was at Grace Cathedral, but I have done some other cathedrals. I've done some office buildings. I've done some private homes. So it really ranges. My venues, are far between and varied. I also still do design installations and so-called like theatrical sets for orchestral performances. And I work a lot with different composers and musicians. So that's a big part of my practice too. And I also paint and sculpt. So I have a sort of a three-pronged artistic practice.
Wow. Well, when you came to Grace Cathedral, what did you know about us when you got here? Had you been here before?
I had never been to Grace Cathedral before, which is kind of, I live in Brooklyn, so I am on the other coast. Grace Cathedral has an incredible reputation as being a very inclusive spiritual space that really invites one and all within its walls to connect with a higher power, however they see fit. I mean, it is clearly an Episcopal church, but I feel one of the things I love about it is that larger embracing aspect of the congregation and the vestry and the ministry. I knew that it was at in one of the higher spots of San Francisco, and I had seen pictures of it, so I knew it was incredibly beautiful. And one of the things I love about it is the fact that most cathedrals are built in the center of the town, and the town towers in around it as time goes on. And I love the fact that Grace is on the top of the hill, and you get all that light and space, and you especially get all the light that goes through those amazing windows. So I was aware of that for some reason. I knew that. So when I came upon it, I wasn't shocked by that, but I was delighted at how beautiful it was and awed by how beautiful it was.
But what, you had some familiarity with the cathedral, but what surprised you about it when you got here?
I think the height.
Yeah.
It is such an incredibly tall space. And the other thing that really surprised me about it is that Gothic cathedrals can often feel a bit dour and a bit lifeless. And your cathedral is anything but that. It has so much light and it has so much energy, and it feels so current. And, that's really unusual, I think, when you have Gothic architecture, to put the word Gothic architecture with current. Just, it's like two different worlds. But there is something about your space. And it may be those amazing windows. It may just be all the incredible spirituality that happens within its walls. But it definitely feels to me like it's a living space. It's not just an old dead cathedral.
Yeah. Were you surprised that we had a residency program?
Oh, incredibly surprised. Incredibly surprised. And it actually, once I was so surprised, I thought, God, that makes so much sense. Where did all the great art throughout the ages usually originate? And who were the big commissioners? It was always the church. If you look back through Renaissance times and before medieval times, it was the only place that most people experienced art was in a church or in a religious space, unless you were a wealthy family and you could commission your own portrait by one of the famous Renaissance painters. So it made a lot of sense, right? I think it makes so much sense. And it's so, it's kind of sad that you guys are the main ones who do it. I don't know that many other cathedrals that have artist in residence programs.
It does feel unique still after all these years.
Right.
When you came to create work here, and, how did that come about? And what did you think, and what inspired you? Like, let's talk about the genesis of really what you came here to do.
Well, I had done a production of the Martyrdom of Saint Sebastian with San Francisco Symphony. And some people involved on your board had seen that. And when I think they heard that the artist in residence was going to be, you guys were looking for a visual artist, but a visual artist who also was connected to music. My name was proposed, and thankfully, I did receive the appointment of artist in residence. So when I first got there, I was very aware of the fact that I wanted to make a piece, obviously a visual piece of art, but it was incredibly important that it was connected to music. And specifically to your choir of men and boys, but also just music in a larger sense. And most of my work is connected to music because I have synesthesia. So when I listen to music, I see color and shape. So it was kind of a perfect blending of my skills with what, in a sense, you guys were looking for. But the first thing I did when I got there was I spent, I think, about 5 or 6 days just really hanging out in the cathedral. And one of the very first things I noticed was pretty much everybody who walks into your space, the very first thing they do is look up. And I think that is twofold. I think it's because it is so tall and so majestic that you are drawn to looking up. But I spent a lot of time in St. John the Divine, and that's equally as tall. And I have not seen people do it as much there. So I think it's partly that as I talked about before, you have so much light and energy in that space. But I also think we have to remember you are in a spiritual place and people are looking up to make that connection with the divine. So it's a twofold thing. It's like a curiosity and also, in a sense, a yearning or a questing, looking for that connection. So when I saw that, I started to think, how can I connect with that and maybe even emphasize that? And then at the same time that I was doing all this sketching in the cathedral and observing and stuff, Joshua Roman, the cellist, was there, and he was trying to figure out the reverb qualities of the cathedral, which I think end up to be 8-second reverb, which is a really long reverb in any space. And he was composing a new piece, which was going to coincide with the opening of my installation. And so he was trying to figure out how he could compose using the reverb and the qualities that were going to be brought to his music through the cathedral. And every time he was playing these really, really long notes and seeing how long a note he could possibly play, and then how long it would take for he had to play that note and then for the note to bounce back to him with the reverb. Mm-hmm. So there was this sense of these long lines spreading out through the cathedral. And I'm sure that's why I suddenly came up with this idea of, his lines were kind of going like this at a diagonal. That's how I saw them when the music was being played. And so I just kind of brought them up a little bit and them come straight down.
Right.
So that's really how it happened.
Right. And so now you're talking about this incredible project. And you can, give us the texture around what this project was, what it was called, but everyone who visited Grace Cathedral in those days or who was on social media got to the pleasure of experiencing the ribbons.
Right. It was pretty early because, that was like early Instagram. Mm-hmm. Because Instagram picked it as, they used to have a thing called Art Thursday, and they picked it as one of the Art Thursday things. And that's when, then we started getting that huge Instagram following through them. Thank goodness that they did pick it and alerted people to it. But yeah, as I said, it was the beginning of Instagram, really.
The installation had a dynamism to it. They weren't just hanging ribbons. Maybe you could describe for us a little bit about what we called it, or you called it, Graced with Light.
Mm-hmm. I call it Graced with Light because it really, it's hard to imagine. I mean, you obviously have to see at least pictures of it, but it is very different when you were there because each ribbon was 86 feet long, and ribbon actually is quite heavy just by the nature of its material. It's so densely woven, and then it has the bound edge. And so 86 feet hanging straight down, obviously all the weight comes down to the bottom of that piece of ribbon. And so the ribbon hung very, very straight, but at the same time as it hung very straight, whenever any air currents were moving through, which was almost all the time, the ribbon would slightly undulate. And so it really looked like light. Most people would walk in and say, oh, it's a light installation, not realizing that it actually was not. It was just a material installation. And I love that idea that you were taking something that was, in a sense, just a mundane material like ribbon. Everyone has ribbon in their drawers at home, and you wrap your packages with it and you put it in your daughter's hair and so on. And that we were taking it and that we are turning it into light. And it was really because of all the reflective light that was pouring into that cathedral, and then all that energy which was being generated. You could say, well, it was just from the air currents, but it was something else going on in there, because there were times where they would just wiggle a little bit like this, and there were other times where they would be so energized that it looked like they were wildly dancing. But again, it still really looked like light, because the light would be going up and down. They're satin on one side, just on one side. So all the time when they're wiggling, you're getting like a kick from the light hitting them. So
it could have been movement of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Yoga was especially kinetic.
Incredibly kinetic, because you had all the people and they'd come in, and it was the end of the day, right? It was 6 o'clock and the cathedral gets cold then, especially in San Francisco with the sun going down, and it gets damper, as we all know. And they would be hanging dead straight. They wouldn't be moving at all. And then as the yoga started going, and you have 600 or 700 people there, and all that body heat rising, the ribbons would start to go crazy. Like you couldn't kind of really believe that it was the same piece of art as it, 45 minutes later. And I know that the yogis absolutely adored that, because it was this real connection. And it was pretty cool that they, through their movement and their meditation, they were making, in a sense, a static thing, crazily wiggling like a wild Sufi dancer. I mean, that's what they were. They're just like, so.
I think you designed it maybe you were inspired in San Francisco. You designed it in your studio in New York.
Right.
And then you installed it with, members of the community, and with the guidance of the amazing Abby McKee, who was our cultural director here at the time.
Yeah.
And you were involved in de-installing it. So what were some of those experiences like?
The putting the piece together was kind of amazing. And, this was my first large scale ribbon installation. I've gone on to make many more for museums and, as I said, other public spaces and so on. And it really influenced me throughout my process and my art making, and how important it is to the pieces that I make that involve the community. And that kind of happened by default, because we had trouble with the guys who were going to rig it. They didn't think they could figure out how to build it and stuff. So we just went into high power, and we took over that large, it's like a conference room that you guys have down in the basement. And it's a really great, fantastic, big room. And Abby and I, and a stage manager who I'd worked with at San Francisco Symphony, and her husband, who was kind of he wasn't really a carpenter. He was like a craftsmaker. He could make incredibly beautiful things. I think he was a prop maker for the opera. The four of us got together and we brainstormed it out. How could we get this piece built so that it could then be installed in about 10 days later? And so we made it a community project where we would send out lots of emails to everybody in the community, invited people to come in and help us. And we'd usually have about 7 to 10 people at a time. And helping meant taking these long pieces of rope, cutting them to specific lengths, and then attaching the ribbons it's usually about 14 to 23 inches. And then everyone had a guide that showed you exactly which ribbon to attach and where, and then labeling the end of the rope. And we had about 125 of these ropes. We had, I think it was 14 miles of ribbon for your piece. That's 16 miles. It was a lot of ribbon.
It was a big number.
And then, rolling the ribbon out, so it was this whole process, and it became like not, as I said, a community project, but it also began to feel like a sewing circle or a quilting bee, where people gathered all together. And Joshua came in and played for us a couple afternoons. And it was just this incredible exchange of ideas and thoughts and conversations while we were building this piece of art. It was really a profound thing. And there's something really lovely about that ribbon. As I said, it's satin, so it feels really good. So it's actually a really pleasurable experience. It sounds like it would get tedious, but it doesn't really, because feels so nice. And the other thing, whenever you're making something, especially with that many people, you could totally see the progress as you were going. So you'd, be like, okay, we've done 25. There are usually about 25 ropes per bay, per catwalk bay. So, the whole process. And we were under the gun. We knew we had to get it done. And we did. And it was a blast.
Yeah. And I remember now during the installation, there was also something really sweet, which is that there were some prayers on the ribbons.
Yes, that was a big part. So what happened in terms of the installation, the blue and the green ribbons went in first. Anyways, that's how it happened. The blue and the green went in first, and then Joshua did his performance. And then I came back about 4 months later, and we decided we put a red center in. And the red ribbons, we invited anyone from the community to come and write their dreams, prayers, and wishes on the top of that ribbon. So at one end of the ribbon, we made that end the top. And then that end was attached onto the ropes. And then again, those ropes were strung overhead in the catwalk bays. And so in almost, not I'd say all, I'd probably say about a third of the red ribbons had some writing on them. Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful because it could be, in a sense, anonymous, so that which I felt very strongly about, so that if you really wanted to write something personal and you didn't want it to be a public message, even though you were hanging it in this huge public space, it was your own private prayer that was hanging overhead.
Something that the dean who was here at the time, Jane Shaw, loved to remind people that one of the wonderful values values to others of the cathedral was the idea of anonymity.
Yeah, I love that. I do remember Jane talking about that. And I think that's what's so powerful when you're in a beautiful religious space, is that you can be a member of a community, but you can also be able to really feel your own feelings and your own thoughts and still be held in this space. And I felt that the way people were able to write those feelings and prayers and wishes onto those ribbons was the same thing, right? Yeah. They're being held in this large public space, but they're private.
What was your favorite memory of your time here during your residency?
It's funny. The first thing that jumps into my head is evening song. I loved the morning prayers. I got to stay in that vestry apartment, so I was right there. And it was a really profound time for me because my father had just passed, and he kept coming back to me right after he passed as a great blue heron. And I don't know if you guys, you probably know it, but in that apartment, there's a huge Audubon print of a great blue heron.
Wow.
And so I had a lot of healing that was going on for myself. And I probably never told any of you that because I think at the time it was still so raw, and we're talking about privacy and community. I think that was a private thing for me, but I felt like I could experience my own healing and my own sharing, and at the same time my own privacy, and especially in being in that cozy little apartment. So it was very easy for me to come down for I think it was 9 or 9:15 is that morning prayer.
9 o'clock. And now we do it online.
Oh, you do? Oh, yeah. That's good to know. And there's that amazing stained glass window, the bright orange one, the very contemporary one, which you look right at. Right there. And so I just loved that for me, being able to look over there and see that contemporary piece of art that had a lot of resonance for me, and it gave me a lot of inspiration. I really connected with that piece. So I love that. I love those lunches in your kitchen. Yeah. I love the way you guys all share your food. I love just being able to go in there. And you're right. I feel so comfortable. If I was in San Fran right now, I'd have no problem just stopping right by and running into your office or into Jude's office and seeing who wanted to have a cup of tea. And that's a pretty special thing, especially as an artist, because we're jumping from one thing to the next. That's our whole lives. And so when you have a place that you feel is holding you and understands you, and also at the same time gave me this incredible artistic opportunity, that's a really special thing. And I'm so immensely grateful for that.
What's your place in life like right now?
I've been mainly doing a lot of work with music, listening to a lot of music and doing a lot of painting. I also have been making these sculptures out of reeds. There's a reed here. They're probably in California too. They're called Phragmites. They're an invasive species. They're really long. They look slightly like bamboo in terms of the reed itself. And it has a big plume at the end, like a big cattail it's not a cattail. It has a plume at the end. And I've actually, it was quite lovely here in March, believe it or not, the end of March. April was horrible. It was really, really cold. But in March, I went and cut about maybe 100 of these down by the river. There's a river here. And I've started making some sculpture out of them. Very simple sculpture, like 3 or 4 uprights and then some diagonal pieces. And then I sort of push them down in the earth. And the reeds actually remind me very much of the ribbons because they grow very, very densely. And when you look at them, they're all really, really vertical and very, very straight. But when you really look at them, they're not really straight. The wind will have gotten a whole group of them and they'll all be kind of curving, but they're all repeating a movement or a shape. So I've been playing with that. So that's been kind of, it's been kind of great. I would never have thought to make something like that if I hadn't been here. If I try to be positive about this whole situation that we've been thrown into. Right. I am hoping to get them cast. I'm not hoping to. I will be getting them cast. A couple of them into a stainless steel, and seeing what that's like. They're tall. They're 8 to 10 feet tall, so they're big. So,
why do you think why do you think art's so important at this time in history? I mean, you were so productive.
Well, no, I don't feel, it's so nice of you to say that. It sounds like, I don't know. I have not been feeling very productive, but I do try to do something every single day just to keep my sanity. And I have a couple artist friends where we take photographs of what we're doing. So we kind of keep each other going. I have another group of artists that I'm in a group with that we're doing. There's this very famous book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Wonderful book.
Yeah, incredible book. And we're actually all pretty accomplished. There's 2 composers, myself, and then a poet. And we're doing that 12-week course together. We're just on our 3rd week, and that's going to be fantastic. It already is fantastic. But to answer your question, I think for me, it's a connection. Is that art is in this time is providing a connection. And I see so many artists reaching out, helping other artists. There's been this great thing on Instagram called the, I can't remember. It was started in England, the Artist Something Fund. And you can only sell your work for up to £200. And once you sell 5 pieces, you commit to buying another artist's piece of work. And there's some fantastic things flying around there. I think in this country, because of the Black Lives Matter movement right now, people have been feeling like they don't really want to post their work and so on, but I'm sure it will come back. And I rightly so. It's taking a little hiatus. I think art really does provide a connection. I have a friend who has a gallery in Harlem and he's been having a hard time. And they've been doing a project where they've been selling their artist's work and they don't take the commission. So I just bought a piece of work and it just arrived yesterday up here in Rhode Island. And it was so incredibly exciting. We all unwrapped it and it's sitting on the little windowsill by the dining room table right now. And everyone walks by and gets to comment on it. So for me right now, art feels like a way to connect and also I think a way to heal. But for me, it's really about connecting.
When we do name our next artist, what would you have as advice for them?
I would say, first of all, make sure you spend a lot of time in that cathedral before you jump on an idea, right? Like just go in there, and it may sound like overkill to spend like 4 or 5 days, but it's worth it because you're going to learn so much about the space. And the other thing is there's so many special spaces in that cathedral. I mean, of course, we're all drawn to the huge nave, which is so majestic the way I was. But those 2 side chapels are so amazing. And then where the AIDS quilt is. And then, it's sort of this magical place. And you got the labyrinth. There's a lot of different spaces. I don't know if you guys are talking about a visual artist or even it doesn't really matter what kind of artist. I just think the important thing is to spend time in that space. And the other thing is to really get to know all of you because you guys are amazing, the staff that's there and the ministry and the administrative staff and Catherine, and don't don't think, well, I'm only here for a little while and they're too busy and I'm not going to cross paths with them enough. Like really go and have lunch in that room. Just bring your sandwich and just sit there and people will come in and talk to you and you'll learn a lot about other people who are involved with the cathedral clearly and work there, but also about the cathedral aspects that you're not going to learn unless you just kind of are in the little round there. I just one thing I didn't want to say is I don't know if you guys know because it's still kind of, but I think that Graceful Light is going to St. John the Divine.
Oh wow! I think we've been kind of hearing little things about how that could happen, I hope it's soon because I really want to see it again.
Yeah, I know it'd be so great. It was supposed to be winter of 21, and now it looks like it's going to probably be more like either fall of 21 or more likely winter of 22. And they're doing a large exhibition at the same time. I would have the name, but on the walls about inequality and incarceration and so on. And so my piece would be like a centerpiece for that. So I'm actually been working pretty hard, conceptually thinking about how my piece fits into that world and what does it mean? And is there a way to actually even use the ribbons as a graphing tool to give some information across, which I'm still.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a way of taking this piece that has been very powerful and possibly transforming it. I can't say I've got it figured out by any means. I've been just, the ribbons have color, length, width, density. So you can see how you could use them as a diagnostic tool or as a graphing tool to convey specific information. You could say like, none of these people ever got to own books. All these people own books or whatever it is. So I'm I've been playing with that. So we'll see.
So besides that, or maybe your answer is that, what is giving you joy or hope right now?
I think the Black Lives Matter movement's really given me a lot of joy and hope.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people who I just feel like people are being opened up in a way they never have been before. I was with my 84-year-old stepmother yesterday, and she is a professor at Yale. And she said, when the students at Yale, the students of color would march and they would have requests for this and requests for this, I just felt like it was often a little too much. And she goes, now after these 3 weeks, I totally get it. Yeah. And I just thought that is so amazing. Someone who's 84 years old, she's British. She's not even from this country. That it just gave me so much hope because I thought an 84-year-old person can open their mind up to thinking differently about something that we've lived with for so long. It must be possible for all of us.